Hi friends, welcome back to Deep Dive with Nema Hakim, with me your host, Nema Hakim, where today we'll be talking about gender-based violence. So please tune in, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the video. Hi friends, so today we have Lydia, Engaisi, and Gervaz. So karibuni sana. You'll find some people or someone is entering the wrong marriage, or just through the pressure. You just meet someone and they're saying, I'm ready to get married. Are you ready? You say yes. Just because of the pressure. You don't know this person. You haven't investigated them enough. You haven't asked enough questions. You don't know how they react when they're facing pressure, or when they're angry, or when they have something bothering them. You just decide to step in because it's what everyone is doing. Everyone's getting married, so what's the worst that could happen? And the worst actually does happen. Yeah, so I would like to get the views on gender-based violence. So I Googled what gender-based violence is. Just give me a second. Let me check on my phone. All right, according to Google, gender-based violence, or violence against women and girls, is a global pandemic that affects 1 in 3 women in their lifetime. So this could be either physical or sexual assault from a partner or non-partner, or it could just be violence in terms of verbal, emotional, yes. So I would like to get your views on GBV, and if you have experienced it, or if you know someone that have experienced it, and how you as an individual feel about it. Yeah. The good thing is we have a man.
I feel like on some level the question is a bit, I don't know.
Not necessarily your views, just tell me.
No, I mean I feel like it's one of those, like, okay, it's obviously a bad thing. But I think so. I think it is obviously a bad thing because it is.
I think it's one of those moral things. Again, we think it's wrong, but same as.
Do you think there is a like, if the other end of the spectrum, is there a justification for it?
My personal views is I disagree with it.
Okay.
But that's not the common view. That's why there are people perpetuating it.
Okay, so maybe I would ask this to refer to, like, the people perpetuating it. Do you think they believe that they're perpetuating it because they believe it is the right thing to do?
Absolutely.
Okay, then
Absolutely.
I will offer a contrasting opinion then to that.
It's from culture as well, especially the culture in Tanzania. And there's this tribe where they're like, if you don't beat me, you don't love me. I think that's where it could stem from. Or if you're stemming from you're growing up and you're seeing how your father treats your mother. Let's say, for example, akiongeza chumvi kidogo tu kwenye chakula, and then you're like, okay, this is acceptable. Because it becomes ingrained in your brain that you're saying, okay, you can beat a woman because she did this, this, and this. It could be something so minor. And this person grows up with that surrounding, and then they go and marry a woman who is against it as well. So you can find those clashing views. Even if there's no excuse to hit a woman or a man. Let's not hit each other. That's...
So my contrasting view for that, and not that I'm sure there are people who believe that they're absolutely justified in what they're doing. But I do think there's also a significant group of people who are, for lack of a better way to explain it, like, if people have if you meet a person who is extremely, I'll use a mild example, extremely jealous, and it comes out in certain ways, even though they might on some level realize that what they're exhibiting is problematic. But there's a reason why, like, it's people don't sort of, and this is not like a justification, but people don't sort of like wake up with some kind of nature that seems like, if people generally can agree that that's probably not a good thing, and that person is on the other side of it, then they might not be in that space because they're like, oh, I believe I'm doing the right thing. But if someone has a shortcoming of being unable to control their anger, or they're just a violent person, and there are people around them who are subject to being hurt by that person's shortcomings. Like, if you enter innocently that sphere of that person and you get influenced by what they're doing, they might not think that they're doing the right thing, but they're just living out their issues on you, if that makes sense.
So they're unaware that they're problematic.
They could definitely be aware of their problem. It's like a person who's an alcoholic. They go back and do the drinking and everything, but they are aware of it. But so for me, a lot of people don't take time. Either I think we talked about this briefly about stuff around introspection. So you have an issue, but let's say you're a dude and you're able to go through life doing whatever you want because there's not a lot of accountability on your end. And that's something actually that I once talked about just generally here, in this country also, the sense of accountability for anything. Like there are things that I've seen, like female friends of mine walk down the street and guys would call out and try and grab them and whatever. But part of it is because they don't really feel like there's any real consequence. If they felt that something could actually happen from doing that, which they shouldn't do, because someone clearly is like, don't do that. But that isn't enough. If they don't have a sense of accountability, that means if they have any reckless behaviors of any kind, they can go about living them out on people and hurting people in society. Even though they're wrong, even though in some place in their mind they have that awareness, it's because you can still get away with it. There are people who steal from people and they know they can because they can get away with it. And it cycles on that way, but I think it isn't so, like, definitely, like I said, there are definitely people who think that I need to discipline this person, so I will hit them. But there's a lot of other, an example of, I think I would still call it gender-based violence, is there are people who prey specifically on women to rob them, basically, because of, like, they'll be like, okay, I'm likely to encounter less resistance or whatever it is that they think. But that is, again, they know that robbing the person is wrong, but they live in a place where they could probably do that, or they could live out what they're trying to do, even though it is obviously wrong, but they're getting away with it because of the way the space that they're operating in is like.
Can I add on to that, on getting away with it? Because you'll find in some counties or some subsidies where when the woman goes to report that my husband has beat me, and this could be in the middle of the night, the first thing the policeman will ask is, what did you do? Why is your husband beating you? And then you'll find they're sending the woman away. Go back to your husband because you must have done something wrong. You'll find this woman is beaten black and blue. Na bado, they're taking him back to their husband's house. Yeah, so that's why we go on accountability for men. But if a man comes to the station, is like, oh, my wife beat me, then he'll be a laughing stock. They will all just burst out laughing and they'll be like, how does a small woman beat you as a man? Go back and manage your household as the head of the household. Yeah.
I think my view is biased about gender-based violence just because I've had a really close encounter with it. So my general feeling is whoever beats their wives deserves to go to jail for I don't know how long yet. I haven't figured that part out. But if I was ever elected to government, that would be one of the things I do. And I guess that could help in resolving the problem, because like Gervaz was saying, accountability is one of the things that we have to take seriously. And I think in the two countries that I've lived, what made a big difference in the prevalence, but then that's also another thing. What made a difference is, I think, the support that was available to women, like you said, who went to report, I guess men and women, who went to report that something was done to them. And that action followed against the person who instigated. But here, what I see personally, what I've seen is, again, like you said, Nema, there is no consequence. And for the perpetrator, it does seem like, if I can get away with it, I'll just keep doing it. And after all, I still really feel like they feel justified in doing what they're doing. There's some who may realize that maybe what I'm doing is wrong, but then they keep doing it. I don't understand that kind of dynamic in someone's head. I'm trying to be empathetic, but I don't. And then for the women themselves who find themselves in these situations, I think they're especially here in Tanzania, East Africa in general, I think they find themselves in an interesting context where they look left to their family members and it's normal to them most of the time. So you go to your mom, and this is common knowledge. You go to your mom, and sometimes we joke about it, but it's actually quite sad. You go to your mom and she tells you, what are you talking about? That's how things are. Your dad beat me senseless. that's why I'm still here. I'm holding down my fort. I'm holding down my marriage. That's something I should be proud of. That's something you should be working on as a woman here. So go back, fix your household, fix yourself because you're the problem, and vumilia. Yeah? So that's one way. They go to their friends. It's probably almost the same. I think there's very few places they would find refuge in a positive way where someone does tell them, yeah, that's not right, and supports them in a way that meets them where they are. Because often there's a lot of feelings of helplessness, and especially economically. You find yourself, you're married or you're in a relationship, and this person takes care of you financially. You don't know where to start if you're to leave, so you feel like you can't. And those are the thoughts that are going through their heads. And so for anyone to tell them to leave, I feel like they already know they need to, but they just look at their situation and it seems so monumental that they can't move it. So I think just a different way to support them, reconfigure their brains, because it does mess you up mentally too. I think that's also essential.
I wanted to add again, one more. On how you said, of course, you're creating a support system for them, and some people will say leave, and then you'll say, they ask you, how do I leave? They say, go report it to the police station. They go report. After they report, where are they going after they report? They're going back to their husbands, the same person that beat them. So I would say, also, in addition to creating a support system, there should also be not necessarily a safe house, just a safe area for anyone going through gender-based violence, so that by the time you have reported it, on your way back, you're not going back to the person who hurt you because you don't know what will happen. Let's do how we can support the victims of gender-based violence. Engaisi had touched on it, being family and friends. If you're a family member of someone going through gender-based violence, or if they're your friend, how can you support them? Yeah, I would not like to start this. Who wants to start this out?
Okay, how can you support friends with who are going through gender-based violence? One, I think the first and most important thing is believe them. I think the first and most important thing is to believe them, because a lot of times the abuser isn't abusive to the people outside of that person, so they might appear in a certain way innocent. The victim might not appear believable, but I think the best way to support them is to believe them, and acknowledge what it is that they're going through, and then ask them how you can support them. Ask them how you can be there for them. Are they trying to get out? Do they need resources to get out? Do they need resources to help them fix the situation? I don't know. But just trying to figure out what they need as well, whilst they're going through that. Those are the two things I could think of off the top of my head.
I think from what I've seen, I think the most difficult challenge for the victim is the psychological part of the violence. I think, again, that feeling of helplessness, I think it's very real, whether it be because it's tied financially to the perpetrator, or, like Gervaz said, when they're in too deep, they've developed bonds that they think, sunk cost effect. So I think I'm not really in a position to help or to give advice on how this part should be handled, the mental part, but I think it's important. So if someone somewhere decides to start maybe a shelter for women, I think they must make sure, or wherever women go to report, there must be psychological support to help them work through their own problems. And because I think at the end of the day, what you want is for that person to decide for themselves, by themselves that they want to leave, and that's the only way I think their leaving is final. Because you might root them out, but then they might still have some residue of weird things going on, and you might find them back. So I think the psychological support is essential.
Yeah, I think that, like what Engaisi and Lydia said, maybe I'll add, and maybe it's just a modification of what you said, offer sanctuary. Because I have been in situations where there's nothing I could really say. Like I can't say anything to change the person's situations. I can't go and like strangle the person. It's just like, but I've been in situations where it's like, okay, if you're in the space to remove yourself from that physical space and you just need somewhere to go, you can come here and just stay until you need to. And if you might go to the police and they might not do anything, but if you have a friend who you know and you can tell them like, okay, if something is happening to you there and you need somewhere definitive where you can go, and maybe you go there and you don't tell anyone, just come and be here, sleep on my couch or whatever it is. It helps sometimes if they have a place to, like, they might not be able to do something immediately, but being away from the place of their tormentor does help sometimes. Yeah.
So while I was looking down on my phone, I was actually Googling ways to help victims of gender-based violence. Then I came across the UN Women, and they have an article on 10 ways you can prevent, or the 10 ways you can help end violence against women. So here, the first was what you said. It was listen and believe the survivors. And it was, the second one is teach the next generation and learn from them. Because this is a generational thing. Let's say earlier we had said, you're looking at how your mother treated your father, or how your father treated your mother, or how they would be quote unquote punished for certain things they did, and you could teach the next generation that this is not the way you would do it. It's not right to hit women. It's not even right to hit men, because I know we're focusing on women a lot in this part right here, but also men as well are going through this. And the next one was call for responses and services fit for purpose. So while I was Googling as well, I found an organization called Men Engage. Let me find it again. Give me a few seconds. Yeah, so it's a member organizations that work together in efforts to prevent and address gender-based violence, sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, and child abuse. So if I find any of their contact info, I'll put it somewhere here. Or if you know anyone going through it, that you can refer them to. And the fourth one was understand consent. I think this is more on the abuser's side when you're listening to them. The abuser side, of course, there's two sides. I'm not victim shaming. Because we don't know who threw the first punch, but either way, it's not right. Yeah. Start the conversation like how we're doing right now, just talking about it, raising more awareness on this, because maybe someone that is actually going through gender-based violence might come across this, or maybe a friend or a family member of someone going through gender-based violence. Yeah. We also have, there's also holding each other accountable and knowing the data and demand more of it. Yeah. So from that, apart from the ones that I'm actually reading, would be, I like how you said providing just a safe haven for them, being away from the perpetrator. Yeah. So to round this up, there's no positive way this can be rounded up. I'm really trying to look for a positive angle. I can't. The consent bit. Just teaching. You didn't get it? Let me open it up. Let's go. Okay, so it says, understand consent, freely given enthusiastic consent. I think this is on the abuser's side. For example, a victim has come to you, let's say they face gender-based violence, and in this case, even rape is gender-based violence. And then you're listening to them, and then a certain thought in your mind goes, but you went over to his house. You were dressed a certain way. Maybe you were asking for it. But in between there, she also said no. But you overlook that no. You're like, oh no, but you went to that person's house. why are you going to this person's house? Okay, maybe I was okay with going to that person's house, but in between there, a lot of things can come into play and minds change. I don't know if that covered it. Did it? Did it still? No? It went out of context again.
Maybe that might be alluding to maybe sexual assault.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Maybe the consent is
Mhm. Yeah.
abuser.
Yeah.
One of those things that like even in this case, maybe
Mhm.
I feel like sometimes there are, uh, let's say, arguments made by, I'll use a sort of like extreme example, by a comedian who was talking about uh, ads about gender violence on, I think it was like the Super Bowl. And he said that he doesn't think that there's someone who sees the ad and is like, oh, I'm not supposed to do that, and then like takes his wife out of a chokehold and tells like it's fine. And it made me think of the argument of, sometimes there are arguments made by reasonable people towards people who are doing unreasonable acts, but those people doing those things they're not convinced by reasonable logic. Like, it's the issues that they have maybe are dealt with in a different manner. Perhaps they could be psychological. Like, if you have to, there are signs that say like, oh, don't pee here, and someone will go by and like, who would pee over there? And clearly for someone without that sign, they would do the thing. And there's someone for whom it doesn't even register at all. And I think even in these cases, especially when it comes to dealing with, maybe even trying to find a way with dealing with the people who are the abusers, the perpetrators of the act. Like, as we've talked about, like offering sanctuary and helping out people, but in terms of dealing with the people perpetrating these things and finding how do you get them, what help do they need to stop becoming the perpetrators of those acts? Because at some points, like, we don't have as many murders, let's say, happening, and maybe it might be partly because of the law and other things, but if there's some things where corruption is a good example, we might have rampant corruption to the point that it is so sort of accepted by society. And even earlier when you spoke on something being acceptable, obviously does not necessarily make it right. Maybe it has become acceptable because people have sort of become apathetic to like, well, maybe there's just nothing you can do or whatever it is, and just steer clear of this situation and that situation. But is there actually something that can be done to change the mentality of those people? Or maybe they need some kind of help to get them from that space into being, like what they do for prisoners, where they say that the point of imprisonment is not punishment, it is reformation. So can you get someone to the other end where it's like, do they get why they shouldn't do what they're doing, or why are they doing what they're doing, and can they be helped to get better?
Yeah, and I think that's not an area we often explore. Maybe in that UN Women, I think the only one I can think of that would be addressing this problem is the one to educate the next generation. So maybe then, but the abusers that are currently abusers, that is definitely something that we should think more on and address.
Okay, so on the abuser side, I want to say therapy, but therapy only works if you want it to work. So you could say you're empathetic to the abuser, maybe they had a rough childhood, hurt people, but they themselves deep down have to want to change their violent ways or their abusive and manipulative ways. But what are the chances you actually meet an abuser that is ready to change and just embrace the other side of his personality or persona? So that's trying to get them there.
Because I don't think they'll just on their own, they'll just like, this is terrible, I think I'm going to stop.
So the reason I laughed when you say that is because I was telling you before the show started that I've experienced GPV. So one of the people that I experienced that with, I reached out to him a couple of years ago. Well, he was trying to reach out to me and, like reconnect. It was someone I was dating in high school and part of university. So I was like, okay, I get that. That's cool. But, you do remember what you did to me, right? Is that going to change? And he literally said, no, that's who I am. You're going to have to accept me as I am if you want to come back into this, otherwise I'm not changing. So that's why I laughed when you said people need to change, because some people are just like, this is who I am, and I'm like, what? After all the hurt you've put me through, you're still gonna stand here many years later and be like, this is who I am, I'm not gonna change. So yeah, people do need to want to change, and not everyone thinks it's something worth changing for. Yeah.
Now, Gravis was saying something about getting them to want to change. Gravis, I am so sorry, Gravis. I am so sorry. So he was saying getting the perpetrator to the point where they want to change. I want to hear that opinion and what you would have in mind, something you would do that would actually want them to snap in their head and be like, oh, okay, so this is wrong and I need to be this other person that is actually good to society and a beneficial member of society and not just a menace.
A menace to society. That's what we do. I don't have any clear-cut solution, because just similarly to how I've found that sometimes the cause of the problem is different. Like on the outside, it might look the same. So you have people who beat their wives and think that, yeah, there are people who act almost like father figures to their wives, and they beat the children and they beat their wives like that. There are people who are reactionary. They're just lashing out at it. If their child comes to them when they're in a certain mood, they'll hit them. If their wife comes to them, they'll, like, on the outside, it all looks like violence of a certain kind, and intrinsically it might be caused by several different things. But I also think the manner in which people get past certain things is different. There's this culture of, I think it's called the guilt versus shame culture, where you have people where sometimes something happens but people aren't prosecuted. They do something wrong, but because someone doesn't want to embarrass them, they don't prosecute them. It's more about withholding, it's more about keeping that person from being ashamed than their actual guilt of what they've done. So people don't get prosecuted for a lot of it. It's stuff also around corruption is the same, where people know that someone obviously mishandled funds or something, but it never comes to a question of them being prosecuted. So there is like the incentives for people to change their behavior over time. Sometimes it can come from legal aspect of something, where it's like, okay, if there is enough response by the police or whatever of like people being gone after. So there's a law society. I think I don't know if it's the Tanzania Law Society. I'm not sure which one it is, but they essentially they train people to go become like legal workers. It's like low-level lawyers to go and help people in certain like rural areas with like small legal matters, but also, let's say, stuff around like inheritance. And there are things that disproportionately affect women more, and it has helped. Some people lack information. Like once they get the information, it might lead to a change in behavior. Some people get shamed into doing the thing that they're supposed to do, because their motivation is like, there's certain countries in Asia where people are so motivated by not bringing dishonor to their families that they will do the thing that they're supposed to do just by virtue of that. And your result on the outside might become a positive one, where it's either some people need therapy, they'll get there, but some people might not respond to therapy. Some people need to be under fear of legal repercussions, they might change. Some people, and maybe this is not shaming, but some people just need to lack the opportunity to do it, in the sense that I have a lot of friends who, they're not protecting the perpetrators of their troubles, but there are a lot of men who fly under the radar and they hurt multiple people, but it's because they also don't get called out on it. And I've always had a problem with making this argument, because I think I said it the other day that the person who is most aware of the depth of someone's crimes is the victim. But the victim is also not as likely to speak out, because one of the reasons that someone can perpetrate those crimes on that person is because they probably there's a power dynamic there which that person can take advantage of to do the thing that they're doing. So it makes it also harder for the victim to speak out against the person who is doing the thing that's problematic. But I think if we can get into a space where more and more people can speak out about it and point fingers at people who are actually doing those things, then it might also reduce the for some perpetrators. Like I think it would be a multiple attacking the problem from multiple sides to keep it from getting to a point where the cases are reduced, let's say. Because you'd shame people, it would be the legal repercussions. It would take a lot of things to also just get the cultural mindset to change so that people grow up in a state where it's like they grow up with the mentality that this is already a bad thing. Like if they fall into it for other reasons, that's one thing, but not, at least I think the people who think that they're justified are probably the hardest to change because they're operating from a mindset in which I'm right. They're probably even harder to change. So I think having a setting in which people come up knowing that something is already problematic might also help with that. But yeah, I don't think I have any clear-cut solution to, it's just more so like trying to attack a thing at every possible point in the hopes that it would bring down the opportunities for that thing to happen again.
I don't think there's anything we can say to beat that. Regarding gender-based violence, I think Gervaz has summed it up. I got it right. I think, yes, he has summed it up really well and very profoundly. I'm happy that I could get a couple of friends to share their thoughts on this because I would not have been able to do this alone. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, guys, and I appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time to actually be here and record this with me. Yeah. And if you've reached this far and you haven't subscribed and you haven't liked, are you proud of yourself? I don't think you are. So I think you should subscribe, like, comment, and share. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.